From the studios of Atlantic Television Network in Port Harcourt, this is ATN International News. First, the headlines. Burkina Faso spies freed after Moroccan mediation. Guinea Defense Minister jailed for corruption. Malawi $6 billion from U.S. firm bidden to attend Trump's inauguration. New York mayor indicted on bribery charges. Malaysia to resume search for missing flights MH370. Russia attack kills one and sparks fires. These and more stories to come your way in a moment. Four French nationals held back in Burkina Faso for a year have been released following mediation from Morocco. France and Morocco said on Thursday, resolving a diplomatic row over their detention. The head of France's Foreign Intelligence Agency, the DGSE, has previously said that these people were spies. A spokesperson for the French military, which oversees the DGSE, and the DGSE did not respond to a request for comment. The French presidency said in a statement that President Emmanuel Macron had on Wednesday thanked Morocco's King Mohammed for his mediation, which made possible the liberation of four countrymen who had been held in Burkina Faso for a year. Morocco's foreign ministry also praised King Mohammed and Burkina Faso's president Ibrahim Traoré and said this humanitarian act was made possible due to the good relations between their countries. Following 3 years of tensions between Paris and Rabat, fueled by immigration issues and the disputed territory of Western Sahara, France reconciled with Morocco, one of its former protectorates, in October. Maintains good ties with Burkina Faso and other military-ruled Sahel states, promising them access to global trade through the Atlantic. But France's ties with its former colonies in West and Central Africa, including Burkina Faso, remain strained. Ouagadougou has expelled French troops and diplomats, ordered France's defense attaché and ambassador to leave, and suspended some French media. Burkina Faso, run by a military junta that seized power in a coup in 2022, has drawn criticism from international rights groups. dollars fine, and his bank accounts and property in the capital, Conakry, and the eastern city of Kankan will also be confiscated by the state. The judge said that the assets were to be seized as the origin could not be justified. Dieng has been in detention since May 2022 when the military junta launched a campaign against corruption in the country. After taking power, the junta made fighting corruption one of its key priorities in the impoverished West African states and established an anti-corruption court. Towards the end of 2022, the military leaders demanded legal action against over 180 people, including ex-ministers and other officials accused of corruption. The junta had then already launched a case against former President Gondé. Many Guineans initially welcomed the military takeover, but now accuse the junta, led by General Mamadi Doumbouya, of stifling dissent. There are growing concerns that the junta has heightened its crackdown on the opposition, especially former allies of the deposed leader. General Doumbouya has in the past promised there would be no witch hunt against the former government. The junta initially proposed a 2-year transition to democratic elections from 2022 after negotiations with the West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS. The promised transition ends this year, but there has been no progress towards organizing an election or on a promised referendum on a draft constitution, which would precede an election in July. In July, the junta presented a draft constitution that would potentially allow Gen Doumbouya to contest the presidency in the yet-to-be-announced elections. Delegations from rival Libyan legislative bodies agreed Libya has undergone a chaotic decade since it split into uprising that toppled Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The talks in Buznika, near the Moroccan capital Rabat, were between rival legislatures known as the High Council of States based in Tripoli in the west and the House of Representatives based in Benghazi in the east. Restoring stability in Libya requires a map to end the candidates. Malawi's government's royalties from a US-based gemstone company for rubies exported from the southern African state over the last 10 years, its Attorney General has told the BBC. Columbia Gem House, a family-owned business which says that it upholds fair trade practices, dismissed the claim as baseless and defamatory. The government is also demanding $4 billion from French gas giant Total Energies in unpaid revenue from an oil storage deal and $9.5 million from Turkish tobacco firm Star Agritech, said Attorney General Thabo Chakaya Nyirenda. Total Energies decided to comment with Star Agritech denied owing any money of around $1.2 billion and 22 times its gross domestic product of $14 billion. Malawi was forced to take a $174 million bailout from the International Monetary Fund last year after running into financial trouble. Speaking to the BBC Focus on Africa podcast, Nyirenda said that Columbia Gem House had been underreporting the value of rubies it had exported from Malawi. He added that some of the evidence that we will be using comes from Columbia Gem House itself, such as which they have now deleted. The amount is not just for 1 year, it goes over 10 years back. It also includes the interest, Nyirenda said. Columbia Gem House said and exported trillions of dollars worth of colored gemstones, the firm said in a statement. They haven't done this by any stretch of the imagination, it added. Columbia Gem House said it does not operate in Malawi, but buys its gemstones from Nyala Mines, a Malawian-owned company in which the government has 10% stake. However, Nyirenda told the BBC that as a minority shareholder, the government was not involved in the day-to-day management of the company, and the name of Nyala Mines had been changed to disguise its ownership. Blackouts, food, fuel, and labor shortages in Cuba grow more acute by the day. Statistics tell the story. Earlier this week, Tourism Minister Juan Carlos Garcia said Cuba saw 2.2 million international visitors this year, well short of its original goal of 3.2 million and less than half of pre-pandemic levels. This year's decline stalled a fledgling recovery following the COVID-19 pandemic. The government said a negative trend that Cuban tourism expert Paolo Spadoni says may be hard to reverse. Unfortunately, Cuba is becoming every day more unique for all the wrong reasons and thus more unattractive as a tourist destination, said Spadoni, an economist at Augusta University in Georgia. Cuba has long appealed to tourists attracted by the mystique of a communist-run island, which, at least to visitors, appears frozen in time thanks to a plethora of 1950s autos and towns mostly free of the kind of commercial development seen elsewhere in the Caribbean. 3 nationwide blackouts in the last month of 2024 touched virtually every facet of island life, including tourism. While some large hotels have generators, lower budget lodging and rental homes often do not, forcing guests in the tropical climate to go without air conditioning. Following the most recent collapse of the island's electrical grid, the tourism ministry sought to reassure prospective visitors. Canada, which sends more tourists to Cuba than any other country, is now telling its citizens to exercise a high degree of caution in Cuba due to shortages of basic necessities, including food, medicine, and fuel. Canada's new Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc said the country's financial reserves are enough to support businesses and individuals if the United States imposes a major tariff. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada and Mexico on his first day in office on January 20th, if those countries do not clamp down on illegal migration and what he calls a flow of drugs across the borders. I am reassured that the government has the fiscal room if there's a decision that has to be made to intervene significantly, LeBlanc said in a podcast on Wednesday, referring to his discussions with finance ministry officials. LeBlanc assumed the role after his predecessor, Chrystia Freeland, stepped down on Monday, citing differences with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on managing finances, including her concern about having enough fiscal reserve to soften the impact of a U.S. tariff. I do not think any responsible government would allow the economy of the country to be permanently scarred by what is a decision of another government, LeBlanc said, adding that he would meet the Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem and commercial bank CEOs in the coming days. LeBlanc did not elaborate on what specific support the government might be contemplating. LeBlanc, who is also Public Safety Minister, said he has had discussions with Trump's Peak 4 Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and hopes to have further talks with him before the new year to discuss border issues. Earlier this week, LeBlanc and fellow ministers announced a plan to beef up the U.S.-Canada border with helicopters, drones, surveillance towers, and sniffer dogs, as well as a joint strike force to target transnational organized crime. Top diplomats from the Biden administration are in Damascus on Friday to meet new Syrian authorities led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a State Department spokesperson said. The official in-person and an official meeting between Washington and Syria's de facto new rulers. The State Department's top Middle East diplomat Barbara Leaf, Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs Roger Carstens, and newly appointed Senior Advisor Daniel Rubinstein, who is now tasked with leading the department's Syria engagement, are the first U.S. diplomats to travel to Damascus since Syria's opposition militaries overthrew oppressive President Bashar al-Assad. The visit comes as Western governments are gradually opening channels to HTS and its leader Ahmad al-Shahar and start debating whether or not to remove the terrorist designation on the group. The U.S. delegation's travel follows contacts with France and Britain in the recent days. In their meetings, the U.S. officials will discuss with HTS representatives a set of principles such as inclusivity and respect for the rights of minorities that Washington wants included in Syria's political transition, the spokesperson said. The delegation will also work to obtain new information about U.S. journalist Austin Tice, who was taken captive during a reporting trip to Syria in August 2012, and other American citizens who went missing during the Assad regime. The United States cut diplomatic ties with Syria and shut down its embassy in Damascus in 2012. In a seismic moment for the Middle East, Syrian rebels seized control of Damascus on December 8, forcing Assad to flee after more than 13 years of civil war, ending his family's decades-long rule. The lighting offensive raised questions over whether the rebels will be able to ensure an orderly transition. Forces under the command of al-Shara, better known as Abu Mohammed al-Golani, replaced the Assad family rule with a 3-month transitional government that had been ruling a rebel enclave in Syria's northwestern province of Idlib. Washington in 2013 designated al-Shara a terrorist, saying Al-Qaeda and Iraq had tasked him with overthrowing Assad's rule and establishing Islamic Sharia law in Syria. It said the Nusra Front, the predecessor of HTS, carried out suicide attacks that killed civilians and espoused a violent sectarian vision. El Salvador said on Thursday it would keep buying Bitcoin, possibly at an accelerated pace, a day after the government reached a financing agreement with the International Monetary Fund that had said it should limit its exposure to the cryptocurrency. Stacey Herbert, El Salvador's National Bitcoin Office Director, wrote on X that Bitcoin would remain legal tender in the Central American country and that the government would keep adding to its strategic reserves. On Wednesday, El Salvador struck a $1.4 billion loan deal with the IMF, as part of which the government of President Nayib Bukele agreed that it would scale back its Bitcoin policies. The deal specified that tax payments will only be made in their other official tender, the US dollar. IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak said on Thursday that the planned legal reforms in El Salvador would make acceptance of Bitcoin by the private sector voluntary. El Salvador owns 5,968 coins valued at $594 million. Bitcoin has rallied in recent days after U.S. President-elect Donald Trump reiterated plans for a strategic reserve for the cryptocurrency, similar to a strategic oil reserve. In September 2021, El Salvador became the first country to make the cryptocurrency a legal tender, alongside the dollar. That caused friction with the IMF, which warned of financial and legal risk that it recently said have not materialized. Republicans in the U.S. Congress said on Thursday they had crafted a new spending package to avert a looming government shutdown after President-elect Donald Trump scuttled a prior bipartisan deal. There is an agreement, Republican Representative Tom Cole, who chairs a committee that oversees spending, told reporters. Details were not immediately available, and it was not clear whether it would get enough support from Republicans and Democrats to pass Congress before funding expires at midnight on Friday. It also was not clear whether it would win Trump's backing. The incoming president has demanded that lawmakers tie up loose ends before he takes office on January 20th and has called on them to abolish the nation's debt ceiling. Unless a deal passes the Republican-controlled House of Representatives and Democratic majority Senate, the U.S. government will begin a partial shutdown on Saturday that would interrupt funding for everything from border and enforcement to law enforcement in the days leading up to Christmas and cut off paychecks for more than 2 million federal workers. The U.S. Transportation Security Administration warned that travelers could face long lines at airports. Previous fights over the debt ceiling have spooked financial markets as a U.S. government default would send credit shocks around the world. The limit has been suspended under an agreement that technically expires on January 1, though lawmakers likely will not have to tackle the issue on the spring. When he returns to office, Trump aims to enact tax cuts that could reduce revenues by $8 trillion over 10 years, which will drive the debt higher without offsetting spending cuts. He has vowed not to reduce retirement and health procedures that make up a vast chunk of the budget and are projected to grow dramatically in the years to come. It was not clear if the Republican plan would tackle the debt. Head of the Transportation Security Administration on Thursday warned that an extended partial U.S. government shutdown could lead to longer wait times. 62,000 employees are considered essential and would continue working with pay in the event of a would be required to keep working but would not be paid. While our personnel are prepared to handle high volumes of travelers and ensure safe travel, please be aware that an extended shutdown could mean longer waits at airports. TSA Administrator David Pecose said on social media. The agency expects Thanksgiving holiday. Without a deal, the Federal Aviation Administration estimates it will have to follow more than 17,000 employees and halt training of air traffic controllers. In 2019, during a 35-day shutdown, the number of absences by controllers and TSA officers rose as workers missed paychecks, extending checkpoint wait times at some airports. The FAA was forced to slow air traffic, putting pressure on lawmakers to end the standoff. U.S. President Joe Biden said he would, of course, attend what he called the Republicans' childish game. The White House has years to break with the political tradition that is seen as affirming the peaceful transfer of power in the U.S. Trump never conceded his defeat to Biden in the November 3, 2020 presidential election and has continued to make up substantiated claims of voter fraud. His refusal to concede led to a chaotic transition of government operations to the Biden administration, delaying funding and access to federal agencies. For his handover, Biden invited Trump to the White House after his November 5th victory, and the two had a meeting described by the White House as very cordial. His administration has been instructed to follow traditional transition procedures. The fact that he doesn't abide by the rules of the democracy we've established is not my concern, Biden said in the interview conducted on Monday. But my job is to make a transition workable, don't agree and not cooperating. Ingrid Louise Martin, a former top aide to New York City Mayor Eric Adams, has been indicted on bribery charges, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg said on Thursday. We allege that the Ingrid Louise Martin engaged in a long-running bribery, money laundering and conspiracy scheme by using her position and authority as the chief advisor to the mayor of the city of New York, Bragg said in a statement. Louise Martin resigned from her post last weekend, and her lawyer did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Adams himself was hit with an unrelated 5-count federal corruption indictment in September. The mayor allegedly accepted illegal campaign contributions and luxury travel from Turkish nationals seeking to influence him. Adams has denied wrongdoing and says he will fight for the charges. He will fight the charges in court. Estate investors in exchange for expediting construction construction permits for businesses they owned. Specifically, prosecutors say the investors gave $100,000 in checks in August 2023 to Louis Martin's son, who deposited them in a bank account he shared with Louis Martin and used the funds to buy a Porsche. Louis Martin allegedly asked the investors to use the encrypted messaging app Signal to conceal the scheme, Bragg's office said. Top diplomats from the Biden British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is poised to announce former Labour Party government minister Peter Mandelson as Britain's new ambassador to the United States, the Times reported on Thursday. Starmer believes that Mandelson has the trade expertise and networking abilities to bolster the country's interests during a delicate period for relations with the US, the report added. Dame Karen Pierce, the current ambassador, will remain in the post until Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. Downing Street did not immediately respond to a report's request for comment. Peter Mandelson was the Labour lawmaker for Hartlepool from 1992 to 2004 and held a number of cabinet positions under Prime Ministers Gordon Brown. On Wednesday, Starmer used a call with US President-elect Donald Trump to restate his view that allies must stand together in support of Ukraine and vow to strengthen the nation's close and historic. China's President Xi Jinping urged Marcos' new government to have the courage to diversify the economy of the world's biggest gambling hub, as the former Portuguese enclave swore in First City, leader born and raised in mainland China. These comments were made at the inauguration on Friday of the Macau government held by former George, who was born in China's southern Guangdong province and speaks fluent Portuguese. Xi called for Macau to develop new industries and connect with China's national development strategies, including the Greater Bay Area and several cities in southern China, including the neighboring financial hubs of Hong Kong and Guangzhou. Since Xi took office in 2013, he has called for the appropriate diversification and sustainable development of different areas of the city, including its universities and special economic zones. Xi urged Macau not to be complacent, change and innovate, and make better use of the one country, two systems framework, which guarantees a high degree of autonomy. Helicopters and divers scoured the waters of India's financial capital Thursday in a search for survivors of a freak boat accident that killed at least 13 people a day earlier. 3 Navy personnel among them, officials said. A naval speed collided with a privately owned vessel taken by Elephanta Caves, famed for their rock art. The ferry capsized as a result, but 114 people were rescued of the 114 people were rescued and 97 were stable. 4 are in a critical condition and 13 dead. The municipal cooperation said on messaging app WhatsApp. Navy and Coast Guard vessels joined into for at least 2 people still believed to be missing. An adult and a child, said a naval officer who sought anonymity as he was not authorized to speak to the media. The officer said the accident happened during the trial of a new type of engine for the speedboat. It appears that the engine got stuck at maximum throttle, but we will know better once the inquiry is completed, the officer told reporters. A naval spokesperson did not immediately respond when asked for comments on the remarks. Television channels showed a speedboat with at least 5 on board crashing into the passenger vessel. Water started gushing into the privately owned Nil Kamal as soon as it was rammed. Witnesses said, and passengers scrambled to do life jackets before jumping into the water. Prime Minister Narendra Modi offered. The boat mishap in the Mumbai is saddening, he added in a post on X on Wednesday. The caves, which are UNESCO World Heritage Sites dating from the 5th and 6th centuries, India monument at the city's southern tip. White House official on Thursday said nuclear-armed Pakistan is developing long-range ballistic missile capabilities that eventually could allow it to strike targets well beyond South Asia, making it an emerging threat to the United States. Deputy National Security Advisor John Feina's surprise revelation underscored how far the once close ties between Washington and Islamabad have deteriorated since the 2021 U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. It also raised questions about whether Pakistan has shifted the objectives of nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs long intended to counter those of India, with which it has fought 3 major wars since 1947. Speaking to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Feina said Pakistan has pursued increasingly sophisticated missile technology from long-range ballistic missiles. Continue, Feina said, Pakistan would have the capability to strike targets well beyond South Asia, including in the United States. The number of nuclear-armed states with missiles that can reach the U.S. homeland is very small, and they tend to be adversarial, he continued, naming Russia, North Korea, and also China. So, candidly, it's hard for us to see Pakistan's actions as anything other than an emerging threat to the United States, Feina said. 2 senior administration officials speaking on condition of anonymity said that the U.S. concerns with Pakistan's missile program have been long-standing and stemmed from the seizes of the rocket engines being developed. They are developing more powerful rocket engines. Sometimes they have refused to do so. Malaysia has agreed in principle to resume the search for missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. Its transport minister said on Friday that more than 10 years after it disappeared in one of the world's greatest aviation mysteries. Flight MH370, a Boeing 777 carrying 227 passengers and 12 crew members, vanished en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing on March 8, 2014. Australia will provide over 100 million to the Solomon Islands to expand its police force, so the Pacific Island nation, which Minister Anthony Albanese said. The US and Australia have been racing to limit China's security ambitions in the strategically located region ever since Solomon Islands then leader Manasseh Sogavare signed a security deal with Beijing in 2022. Albanese told reporters in Canberra on Friday funding commitment to expand the Royal Solomon Island Police Force over 4 years with training and infrastructure showed Australia was the security partner of choice to the Solomon Islands. The move responds to Solomon Islands' strong desire to build an enduring sovereign security capability, thereby reducing its reliance on external partners over time, Manele said in a joint statement. Manele had requested funds to double the size of the Royal Solomon Island Police Force from 1,500 to 3,000 officers during a visit to Canberra in June. This partnership will strengthen the Solomon Islands' domestic security, but it will also enhance its ability to contribute to regional stability, Albanese said. The Pacific Islands Forum agreed in August to form a regional police Nauru police ties with China. Taiwan's central bank on Thursday raised this year's growth forecast for the tech powerhouse islands, but flagged risks for the next year centered on the trade policies of the incoming Trump administration in the United States. Taiwan's economy has benefited, but given its reliance on trade, Taiwan could be vulnerable to across the board import tariffs U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has said he will impose. He takes office discount rate at 2% as expected. That uncertainty about U.S. trade policy had greatly increased, and it was advisable to be cautious for possible changes in the global trade landscape. The bank said it expected Taiwan's economy to continue the growth momentum next year, with new technologies including the AI boom continuing to boost the island's exports. But it is said its 2025 GDP outlook has not yet factored in the possible impacts of changes in USA trade policy. That is too big an uncertainty, Governor Yang Qinglong told reporters. The trade policy of the new U.S. government is an important variable for our economic growth next year. Taiwan's central bank has chosen to chart its own path and not follow the lead of the U.S. Federal Reserve, which on Wednesday cut its benchmark interest rate by a quarter of percentage point. We'll go on a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the rest of the stories. Welcome back. French court found Dominique Pellicot guilty on Thursday of repeatedly drugging and raping his wife for almost a decade and inviting dozens of strangers to rape her unconscious body in a case that has horrified the world. All the Frenchman's 50 co-defendants were also found guilty of rape, attempted rape or sexual assault, while their victim, Giselle Pellicot, sat in the packed courtroom to hear the sentencing, having waived her right to anonymity. Giselle, 72, has become a symbol of female courage and resilience during the 3-month trial, and crowds of supporters outside the courthouse in the southern city of Avignon cheered, and she appeared after the verdict had been read out. This trial was a very difficult ordeal, she said in her first comment at the end of the sentencing, adding that she did not regret her decision 10 years demanded by the prosecution. Russian missile attack killed 1 person and damaged buildings across Kyiv. Local officials said after explosions were heard in Ukraine's capital on Friday. The rush hour attack sparked fires in several buildings and damaged multiple office buildings, according to the head of KIG's military administration, Serhiy Popko. Russian forces used 8 missiles, including hypersonic Kinzhal missiles and Iskander KN-23 ballistic missiles, to carry out the attack. According to Popko, Mayor Vital Klitschko said that the attack injured at least 7 people, 4 of whom were taken to the hospital. Ukrainian air defenses were engaged in repelling the missile attack on Kyiv, local officials and the Air Force said earlier on Friday. Reporters, witnesses and said they heard multiple explosions following an Air Force warning about an attack. Court in Moscow on Thursday ordered the suspect in the killing of top Russian general Igor Kirillov to be sent to pretrial detention for a period of 2. Russia said on Wednesday it had detained a suspect who had confessed to planting and detonating a bomb in Moscow which killed General Kirillov, who was the chief of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical protection troops, on the instruction of Ukraine's SBU security service. And that's the international news for today. I am Francis Neka. Thank you for watching. You can follow us on all our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, at AtlanticTV.net, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram at Atlantic TV Network. Watch us live on our website, Atlantic TV. And remember, peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Coming up next is Business News.